Hi, fourth graders. It's Mrs. Lacrosse here. I heard from your teachers that you guys are about to study Gold Rush or have just started. So a really brand new book just came out, and it's called Gold Rush Girl, and it's by Avi. And Avi is a great writer. He's actually one of my favorites. He's written a lot of books. You may have read True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle, but if you haven't read that one, you should, maybe during this time. He also wrote another really good one that's a two-book. It has two parts, book one and book two, and is called Beyond the Western Sea, about these kids who come to America from Ireland, and it's so good. He's written so many books. I have a whole shelf of Avi books in the library, but this is his latest, and it is about the gold rush. Now, I've finished it. It's a good story. I'm predicting he might write a second, and possibly this could turn out to be a trilogy. I would hope. I think it definitely has potential to be. So it's pretty exciting. It doesn't go into a lot of detail about the diggings, where they actually were digging for Gold Rush, but it does give you a really clear idea of what San Francisco was like, because most of the story is set there. So it's definitely worth reading for that alone. And the main character is a girl. And one thing I'm just going to say before I start is that she starts right away by talking about a character from a book that she's reading called Jane Eyre. And Jane Eyre is a classic novel that you will probably read in high school. And it's about a girl who is an orphan and who is not treated very well and who is really strong-willed, and so the character in the story really admires her. So I think the rest of it is self-explanatory, but if you have any questions about the setting or any of the characters, you can post some comments under the link to where I post me reading this first chapter. So the title is called Gold Rush Girl. Chapter 1. Have you ever been struck by lightning? I have. I write not of the sparkling that bolts from the sky, but of the gold, the yellow metal buried in the earth, and the shatter-wit world of those who seek it. That world turned me topsy-turvy, so that I did things I never dreamed I would or could do. It began, fittingly, in a leap year, 1848. I was 13 years old. My family, father, Randolph Blaisdell, mother, Abigail Pell Blaisdell, my younger brother Jacob, and I, Victoria, most often called Tori, was residing in the small estate in the United States, Rhode Island. We had a home in Providence, Rhode Island, the state's major city, with its fine buildings, wealth, tranquility, and a population of 40,000. Our home was 15 Sheldon Street, a modest but agreeable wooden house on the east side of town. It stood upon the hill, as we smartly called it, above commercial Wickenden Street. We had a cook and one servant, both of whom lived in our attic. Our lives were comfortable, with nothing unusual ever happening. Indeed, my early family life was untroubled, as smooth as Chinese silk. I questioned nothing, not about the world or about myself. My entire universe was Sheldon Street, which meant I knew everyone as they knew me. As for my social life, it consisted of calling and receiving among a small group of proper neighborhood girls. As one grows up, it can take a while to understand that sometimes it is not your mother or father who have the greatest influence on your life. Thus, it was but gradually that I came to realize that the person who shaped my life more than any other was my mother's older sister, Aunt Lavinia. Since the two sisters were from a distinguished Rhode Island Pell family, Lavinia already considered herself quite a queen. Then, before I was born, she married Quincy Fellows, a wealthy Pawtucket cloth factory owner, and that made her, in her mind, an empress. a tall, big woman with hanging coils of braid alongside her puffy face, which peered out from a deep, dark bonnet. She wore long, wide gowns with bulging sleeves, a shape that made me think of her as a walking mountain, and a volcano at that. Indeed, she constantly erupted with lava-like judgments, advice, and instruction as to how my family should live our lives. All of which is to say, while my mother and father raised me, their words were almost always prefaced by, "As your Aunt Lavinia suggests." One of Aunt Lavinia's judgments, which I was shocked to discover, was that my mother had lowered her station in her life by marrying my father. Father was a man of middle age and modest height. Quite portly, he had a round, smooth, shaved face and fair hair brushed with care. His soft pink hands, somewhat ink-stained, were what you would expect of someone who wielded a pen, not a pickaxe. At home or at work, he attired himself in common gentleman's fashion: an English frock coat, a vest, knotted neckcloth, tan pants, and tall black silk hat. Father worked as an accountant for Pratt and Wingast, a respectable trading business which had its offices on Peck Street in the middle of Providence. Significantly, it was a position secured by him by my Aunt Lavinia's husband, a fact that she did not let father or mother ever forget. Still, after 10 years of service, father received a silver pocket watch in recognition of his good work. He liked to bring it out at regular intervals so as to suggest that he was a busy man. In fact, I had come to understand it was displayed mostly to show Aunt Lavinia that he was truly worthy. But then, as I came to realize, father's highest ambition was to become acceptable to Aunt Lavinia, and he chose to do so by agreeing to all her advice and judgments. As for my mother, she had a kind-hearted, loving nature and looked after all of us, trying her best to shield us from her sister's dictates. By way of personal occupation, other than supervising her children's upbringing and managing the household, she had her readings, popular romances such as The Betrothed, and her needlework to do. Yet while mother was a quiet soul, sometimes when I watched her sewing, it seemed as if she was frustrated with her life and used her needle to pierce the fabric of her world. Exasperated by my parents' constant deference to Aunt Lavinia, it was upon my youngest brother, Jacob, that I bestowed my deepest affections. More than anyone else, he was willing to listen to my endless prattle. Most of all, he didn't criticize me. We were as close as kin could be, and I enjoyed his company greatly. Jacob, 4 years younger than I, had a pleasing apple-cheeked sweetness. An earnest, serious, almost solemn boy, he was not given to mischief. When he played with his school friends, he did so quietly and without much zest. He was fond of music and enjoyed whistling the popular songs of the day. That said, his whistling told me that he was troubled. Wherever Jacob considered me hot-brained, he fretted far too much, and his worry made him agitated. Jacob appeared to be the least bothered by how much our lives were governed by my aunt, however. But then it was Jacob of whom Aunt Lavinia most approved. She, who had no children of her own, once said, "Jacob is the perfect child. He is quiet and does what he is told. We should all encourage Victoria to be more like her brother." Once she informed me, "You know, Victoria, that someday Jacob will be the head of the family, and you indeed will defer to him." Young though I was much distressed, and I replied, "Jacob shall have his life, I shall have mine." To which Aunt Lavinia scolded, "Nonsense! A girl's life should be solely dedicated to taking care of others." I'm sure that made me pout in my mouth. Because I resisted my aunt's dictates, she was particularly harsh on me. finding me too independent, too bold, and far too free with my opinions. But the truth is, there were few aspects of my life which did not come under her firm declarations. Victoria should dress this way. That meant, for example, that I must never go outside without gloves and a bonnet. Victoria should have proper acquaintances. This meant that Mrs. Biggs was not suitable friends, whereas Mrs. Colchester were. I was never told the reasons. Victoria should be taking dance lessons from Mrs. Culbrett's Academy of Dancery. I attended weekly. And to call Victoria Tory is vulgar. Once I was no more than 10, she told me, unless you change your opinionated ways, you will not find a suitable man willing to marry you. My retort was, I intend to remain self-governing. When Jacob turned 6, I was 10, he began to attend a school selected by my aunt, the Rhode Island Institute of Instruction in Providence. She further proclaimed that it was sufficient for a girl to be educated at home, save Sunday during church school. My parents did as she advised. I did not go to school. Whereas Jacob went to school tamely, I objected to not going and did so strongly. While I argued, should I not get an education? Was I not the eldest child? Was I not quick-witted and eager? Father consulted his pocket watch and said, we shall do what Aunt Lavinia advises. While I did not go to school, my mother sympathized with me. She took it upon herself to teach me to read and write, as she told me her own mother had taught her. Additionally, I secretly persuaded Jacob to share all his school lessons with me. That allowed me to be educated on my own. The truth is, I far surpassed him. I was therefore soon reading a great deal. Alas, the books in our home were too few and too limited. Having a desire for more knowledge, I took small monies that I had saved, birthday and Christmas gifts, and telling no one, walked downhill to the Providence Fine Library. But when I placed my sparse coins on the counter and informed the white-haired gentleman's secretary that I wished to purchase a membership, he told me that I did not have nearly enough. Disappointment must have clouded my face. The secretary considered me with a kindly smile, paused a long moment, and then leaned down and whispered, since you are so young and so eager, I shall give you a free subscription. But, he added with his fingers to his lips, you must not tell anyone. I went from rejection to rapture. I borrowed books and hid them in my private room. At night, while the whole house slept, I read voraciously by candlelight and learned that stealthily reading is absolutely sublime. Reading became my other world. I discovered and consumed volumes by Mr. Edgar Allan Poe, Mr. Dickens, and Miss Jane Austen. Did I understand them all? Of course not. But then, people do not generally grasp the true value of reading. It is not to learn about others. It is to learn about oneself. Thus is how I came upon the recently published autobiography of Jane Eyre. That book transformed my life. Sorry, I lost my page. Okay, actually, that's the end of chapter 1. So we leave off with her discovering the book of Jane Eyre and her saying that that book transformed her life. We got an idea of the setting and of what her life is like. And you guys can probably start to make some predictions about the kind of girl she is and what's going to happen. And obviously the gold rush is going to come into play. And there again is the cover. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'll read you some chapters. And I'll try to post them as often as possible so you guys can have some reading, some listening. I'll read aloud for you in between doing your junior grade books work. And I hope you're not stressing out about the junior grade books. There's no reason to. Read the stories like we were doing. Ask yourself some questions as you're reading. Answer the questions that I'm asking of you guys. Think about how do you know that? Like what quote can help you prove what you think? That's super important. And then I was just asking you guys to write in complete sentences, because the first round, a lot of them were not, were like one sentence answers, and I'm not liking that. So I was hoping, since you had some time at home, you could write in complete sentences and put quotation marks around the quote that you pull from the book. And then just in parentheses right after, put the page number that you found it on. That's all. It doesn't have to be a big deal. I hope you enjoy the stories. And a good way of knowing that you understood a story too is retelling it. So if you have like siblings around who seem bored, or maybe at the dinner table, you can retell some of the stories if you like them. Okay. Take care, fourth graders. Miss you all and hope you're doing well out there. Well, in there. Hopefully you're staying home and staying isolated. But do get some fresh air when you can. Bye for now.